We've spent a ton of time over the past couple of months revisiting some of the oldest ships in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, vessels first introduced, for example, in the West Endgame source books of the late 1980s. For example, we talked previously about the rare Imperial quasi-superweapon known as the Torpedo Sphere, which was designed specifically to crack through planetary shields. Today we'll be talking about something much smaller, but in my opinion just as interesting, the Imperial Assault Shuttle. This vehicle is probably well known to fans of X-Wing Alliance, and in both that game and the overall lore, it was extremely powerful. So the Assault Shuttle was first introduced in the Imperial Sourcebook, and although it's only described by the name Assault Shuttle because of the variety of other Imperial shuttle types, it's later been given the designation in other sourcebooks, like the Starships of the Galaxy Guide, the Gamma Class Assault Shuttle. Now, this isn't to be confused with the Gamma Class Assault Transport, which I actually did at first when recording this video. That's also in the X-Wing series, but it is different. So the Assault Shuttle is such a beefy ship that even though the Imperial Sourcebook recognizes that of course it's not a capital ship, it includes it in the section anyway. According to the guide, assault shuttles regularly engage capital ships in combat or are used to ferry zero-G stormtroopers or space troopers aboard an engaged vessel. And this is the main thing that separates the Assault Shuttle from the other Imperial shuttles we see in Star Wars. These were extremely heavily armored and armed, and were often used to capture ships. Unsurprisingly, the Assault Shuttle was extraordinarily sturdy. The same section states that assault shuttles are among the most heavily shielded vessels in the Imperial fleet. Most combat starships funnel approximately 25% of their total power through their shield generators. An assault shuttle uses up to 62% power on shields, with most power being dedicated to the front shielding arc, which makes total sense. If an assault shuttle is going to try to board an enemy craft, it's going to have to fly directly at it and will probably be taking fire from capital ship grade weapons. If you have an escort of starfighters, you can watch the ship's rear and protect against bogeys, but there's really nothing that can stand up to a capital ship other than extraordinary shielding. Of course, the SAG Edition Starships of the Galaxy Guide does sort of bring things back to a reasonable point, stating that although these shields are extremely strong, they still can't survive a sustained burst, so really the shuttle wants to get in, drop its troops off, and leave. On that note, let's talk the troops. The Imperial Shuttle is 30 meters long and could carry 40 zero-G assault troopers. If you don't know what a zero-G assault trooper is, well, you haven't yet read the Thrawn trilogy, so you owe yourself that, but they're basically stormtroopers meant to operate in, well, zero-G, in vacuum. They of course had fully airtight suits alongside maneuvering jets and special weapons. They were pretty heavily armed, and in Heir to the Empire, they seem like incredibly deadly opponents. Like, they can lock onto the hull of a ship and shoot through, destroying it. Presumably, that's how the Imperial Assault Shuttle usually operated. They would drop troopers off towards the intended captured vessel, then the troopers would use their own tools to cut through the hull and begin the breaching procedure. There's of course an advantage there. If you're exposing the ship to a vacuum, you're risking the lives of the crew while you yourself are protected. Although, that being said, assault shuttles certainly would have been capable of more traditional drop-offs in a hangar. Space troopers were usually equipped with heavy weaponry, but also things like grenade launchers, plasma cutters, and more. Sort of implicit in this whole situation is the fact that the enemy capital ship needs to be disabled or at least not operating at full potential. Usually ships will have shielding, which would make it difficult for any sort of boarding action. According to the Starships of the Galaxy Guide, when initiating a boarding action, the shuttle's primary tactic is to disable the enemy vessel using a combination of pinpoint turbo laser blasts and ion bursts. At that point, if possible, it uses its tractor beam to clamp on or at least approach the vessel, then launches its troops, then using its other weapons to provide covering fire. The Gamma Assault Shuttle's weaponry varies depending on the source book, but you can see from this top-down cutaway that there were typically 4 turreted cannons. Now, presumably these could be ion cannons, and that's what I would imagine would help with capturing enemy ships, but sometimes the source materials refer to turbo lasers, other times blaster cannons. I think this is definitely something that could vary depending on the required mission type, the specific shuttle configuration or model, and probably more. Other things to note from the sourcebook is the fact that the assault shuttle could operate both within atmosphere and of course in 0G, and it seems like stormtroopers would not have entered the ship in their power armor, rather it was constantly being charged at the specific stormtrooper 0G armor charging stations, then they were launched out through specific launch ports. Although they did possess a hyperdrive, assault shuttles would have much more commonly been launched from larger ships, especially Imperial Star Destroyers, which commonly had at least one of these vessels in their hangar bays. The Star Destroyer would have also most likely had a specialized crew ready for the shuttle at all times, not just a crew but also the needed assault troopers. So yeah, I really like this ship. I think it makes a ton of sense. I also like how visually it looks really similar to a shrunken Imperial Dreadnought cruiser, especially some of the old Dreadnought designs with the flared out engines. It also of course looks very similar to a Carrack, especially because the Carrack at 350 meters long looks shuttle sized because of its weirdly ginormous front window. It's interesting to contrast this with something like a LAP, which was obviously meant to deliver troops but in a much different way. That was a sort of rapid deployment vessel and of course could provide light support as well, whereas the assault shuttle was meant to take some hits going in, keep on trucking, drop troops off, while also doing some damage. This thing, as mentioned, could take on and even sometimes disable much larger ships, although generally it'd want to rely on its mothership and the rest of the fleet. I'd like to see more boarding action in the future as well. It's sometimes kind of goofy when it's done. I'm thinking of, for example, Lost Stars, where the good guys are trying to steal a Star Destroyer at Jakku. That was just a little silly because it was like 5 guys versus a Star Destroyer. But anyway, let me know what you thought of this video. Is there a classic Star Wars ship you'd like to see me cover next? Let me know down below and make sure to subscribe for more content. Till next time guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.